Hello and welcome to the MovieKing Podcast. My name is David Jurmann and I'll be your host. On today's episode, I'll be reviewing the film Better Man. So, as for Better Man, boy was I excited for this movie. Sometimes a movie just comes along that I had no awareness of until the trailer came out, and then I was so hyped for it. Some examples of this are Marcel the Shell with Shoes On, A Monster Calls, Heretic, and most recently, Better Man. To be frank, I wasn't even aware who on earth Robbie Williams was until just a few months ago. He's like the big person this movie's about, and I had never heard of the guy. In the trailer, he literally says he's one of the biggest pop stars in the world, and meanwhile, I had no clue the man even existed. But I guess that goes to show why he said the world, because he's very big in the UK it seems, but not the US. In any case, I think the first time I heard of this movie was when people saw it at Fantastic Fest back in September for a secret screening. People described it as a musical biopic with Caesar from Planet of the Apes, and I was just like, what? But then the trailer came out, and I was like, oh my god, I get it. I want to see that. I really want to see that. The second trailer was even better than the first, and got me ridiculously hyped for this biopic about a singer I never listened to. I never knew who this guy was, and now I was dying to see this movie. I think the second trailer in particular, like, if you're studying trailers in like film school or something, go watch that trailer because that is like a 10 out of 10 trailer, a really good trailer. And I was so excited that when I saw a mystery movie screening was happening this week, I was willing to sit through utter crap, Den of Thieves 2, just to have the chance to see this movie a few days early. Nothing against Den of Thieves 2, by the way. I haven't even watched the first one, but I was not interested at all in seeing that, and I was willing to sit through it because I was dying to see Better Man. But thankfully, right I was, because I saw Better Man at that mystery screening, and it is bloody awesome. But shout out to the people who audibly groaned in the theater when the movie was revealed to be this, because I was so hyped. Like, I was like, oh my god, yes, thank god, and everyone, like, the people behind me were like, oh, the Robbie Williams movie, oh, the monkey, get it out of here. I was so excited, though. I'm just so happy to say it's good, because this movie comes from director Michael Gracie, who brought us The Greatest Showman, which to me is one of the most disappointing movies I can remember in the last decade. And a movie that, besides anything that has to do with the musical numbers, really, is pretty bad. I really don't care for that movie. I mean, it's one of those things where, like, I watched it, and when I first walked out, I was like, that was alright, I guess. And then the more I thought about it, I was like, that just wasn't a good movie. And I was super hyped for it, too. And meanwhile, I know a lot of people really love that movie. A lot of people, like, think it's great. And I'm not sure how those people will respond to Better Man, because they're actually very different movies. One is a lighthearted family drama about a circus, and the other is about a guy who looks like an ape, doing lots of drugs and drinking and making reckless choices. But if you heard me say he looks like an ape, you don't need to get your ears checked. In this movie, they make a choice to have Robbie Williams, the singer, be a CGI ape. And it's a choice that may sound stupid on paper and may sound like a really questionable choice, but trust me, it works. And it's done for good reason. Like, there's actually, symbolic reasoning behind it. It's not just like a money, cash grab decision. It's not something, I'm sure they didn't just choose to spend, so much money on doing all these visual effects if it wasn't for good reason. Like, that's what I have to say. Like, it really enhances the story. It enhances the way it's telling it. It's done for a reason. And while I'm on the subject, the visual effects in this movie are exceptional. It's by the same people who worked on the recent Planet of the Apes movies, which, if you know those, like, those look crazy good, and you totally believe you're looking at an ape, but he still feels very human, if that makes sense. It's not uncanny. It really feels like you're looking at this ape who just, like, has a lot of human features and really, like, expresses a lot, and it just really works. And it's all held together by the unsung star of the movie, Jono Davies. He does such a great job with the motion capture and giving an exciting and emotionally rich performance, with Robbie Williams himself providing the songs and narration in the beginning and end. Jono Davies, though, really deserves a lot more recognition than he's getting. I mean, just a little story that happened just a few days ago. I went into this movie thinking Robbie Williams played Robbie Williams in this movie the entire time. And I thought that still while watching the movie. And it wasn't until literally after the movie, when I posted online, like on Twitter, I was like, this movie's amazing, you gotta go watch it. and I saw this guy named Jono Davies like it, and his profile said Robbie Williams in Better Man, and I was like, what? And I looked further into it, and he played Robbie Williams in the movie, and I'm like, what? How did I not know this? And like, this guy, he's so good in the movie, but I really did not know he played it. And personally, I blame that fully on Paramount, because as far as I'm aware, in the trailers and the poster and everything, they've made it sound like Robbie Williams played himself the whole time, but that's simply not the truth. Jono Davies does, and he's really good at it. He really does an exceptional job here at just capturing that energy, and really, I was convinced the entire time that was the actual Robbie Williams, so the guy needs a lot of credit for that. Even though I don't really know Robbie Williams outside of this movie, I really felt like he was playing him, and that's something that deserves a lot of credit. Going back a little bit, though, I want to give director Michael Gracie some more credit. He makes one of the most visually dazzling movies I've seen in a long time. This film is the definition of movie magic. There's great visual storytelling, these dream sequences that grip you and immerse you. There are these amazing musical numbers that have awesome choreography, dancing, production design, effects, and transitions. It all just comes to life in a way that you couldn't do in a Broadway show and you couldn't do in some other medium, but you can only do in film. This movie has like a heightened sense of, reality, where things that are happening aren't real clearly, like they're clearly in a dream-like state. If you've seen the movie Rocket Man, you know that like a lot of the songs in that movie just kind of have like, Elton John like flying and stuff, and it's like these things aren't actually happening. That's what this movie does too, but it does it in a way that's very tangible still. Like you're still able to connect to it, because in a lot of ways it's trying to say something and communicate something about how Robbie Williams' character feels in the movie and why he feels the way he does. But even with all of this flashy imagery, you need above all a good story and characters. A complaint I have about some other biopics is that I didn't learn much about who the person behind the songs is, or that it's not an honest representation of who they actually are or what they've gone through. I understand some movies, especially of this nature, need to kind of mess with reality a little bit. Like, you need to maybe dramatize a little things, you need to maybe have some events take place at a different time. There's an exception to that. I think, like, there's a reasonable limit to that. Some movies do it a lot more than others. Like, I think Bohemian Rhapsody did it to a really obscene degree, to the point where the movie's not even really a true story anymore. It's just kind of like, you just made up the whole thing and just maybe put in a few details that made it Queen-related. I think this movie, from what I've gathered after the fact, seems like it does an overall truthful job. Like, it does tell the story as it generally happened. Maybe it kind of changes a few characters a little bit, but overall it sounds like they did an honest job, and I think a lot of that is because Robbie Williams was working on this movie too behind the scenes a little bit as an executive producer. But look, I even said all this about The Greatest Showman itself. Like, the real P.T. Barnum was a terrible human being. He's at the bottom of the barrel, but the movie makes him look like a decent person who just had some flaws. Better Man, on the other hand, has Robbie Williams being as vulnerable as possible. You can so tell, like, he really put everything in his soul into this movie. There were so many times throughout the film where I thought, this guy hates himself. Like, this guy was awful to himself and those around him. But it also offers sympathy, because a major theme of this movie is evolving, forgiving, and working on being better. And I think it just all comes together in this way where, it's honest about who Robbie Williams was, but it also allows us as an audience to feel for him and want him to get better and want him to figure out what he's got going on. So it's a really tough balance, but I think the movie nails it. It's a beautiful story, and even though it's coated in cocaine and doused in booze, there's something so human and heartfelt about the whole thing. The movie is very heavy and sad at times, but it also has humor and fun. But the movie is also incredibly emotional. I didn't expect to be so moved by the end of it. The final scene nearly had me in tears. It broke me, really. I'm not even kidding. Like, I really just did a number on me, and in a good way, though, where I just sat there in silence during the credits, just pondering everything I just watched and, like, how it really related to the characters. It really just moved me a lot, and that's something I love when that happens. Like, I don't have that often where a movie just hits me so hard that by the end of it, I'm just like, really speechless. Maybe the last time was like The Iron Claw. Like, that's maybe a movie that did that to me a little bit. This movie just does it terrifically, though. The film tackles several decades of Robbie Williams' life, and that does lead to a bit of a slow burn, which I would say is my only nitpick with the film if I'm going to say any, but it didn't really bother me, honestly. It's a memoir of sorts, so it spends a lot of time settling in different periods of time before moving on to something else. I had high expectations going into this movie, but I was still blown away by it. It's not reinventing the genre, don't get me wrong, it's not avoiding the tropes we've seen before, but I think that's okay. There's something different about it this time, something that makes it more authentic than most, at least to me. I don't know if it's the fact that, Robbie Williams is an ape, or the fact that, it's like, just told so differently than a lot of biopics, but even though it's a familiar kind of story, as a lot of these biopics are, I just really loved it. I think it's great and such an awesome movie. And this may be too early to say, maybe it's just like the recency bias of it all, but I would go as far as to say that this is the best music biopic I have ever seen. I was so satisfied by Better Man, and it's without a doubt one of my favorite movies from 2024. It left such an impact on me, and movies like those don't come around often. So I'm going to give this movie a well-deserved A+. Definitely go see it if you get a chance. I was really going to review A Complete Unknown this episode, but I know this movie's coming out this weekend wide, as a wide release, and I want as many people to see it as possible because it cost a lot of money. It was a risk to make this movie, especially in the US where people don't even really know Robbie Williams, and it deserves all the support it can get. So if you get a chance and you're interested, go check it out. I think you'll really enjoy it. And that about does it for this episode. If you want to follow my reviews, you can find me on Letterboxd at MovieKing1224. You can also listen to this podcast on your favorite apps such as Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music. If you have any comments or feedback, I would love to hear it and improve this show. And of course, if you've enjoyed this episode, please consider liking, subscribing, and hitting the notification bell to hear more like it. I appreciate you all so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.